name is Sarah Ikenberry, and I work in the Office of Therapeutic, Biologics, and Biosimilars at the Food and Drug Administration. And today I'm going to talk to you about biosimilars and tell you all about what patients need to know. This is just a brief disclaimer that these are my views, and the information in these slides can be copied. So we will go into more detail about biosimilars, but I want to set the stage a bit to talk about the conditions that they are approved to treat, which are chronic skin diseases like psoriasis, chronic bowel diseases like Crohn's disease, diabetes, macular degeneration, arthritis, kidney conditions, some cancers, and multiple sclerosis. And so this is a snapshot to date of all the approved biosimilar and interchangeable biosimilars in the US. There are 45 approved to 14 different reference products, and around 38 of these are available on the market. But before we talk about biosimilars, it is helpful to understand more about biological medications in general. So most biologics are made in or from living sources like cells or microorganisms like bacteria or yeast. Biologic medications are usually more complex than other drugs, such as aspirin, and they're more complicated to make because they are from these natural sources. And so biologics are also much larger molecules. And you can see they range in size from insulin all the way up to monoclonal antibodies, which are very large compared to the insulin. And you can also see in this little zoom snapshot, like how the aspirin, which is very, very tiny, if you zoom in just to one piece of the mAb, the aspirin, is a fraction of the size of the monoclonal antibody. And you might have heard of monoclonal antibodies first used when they were talking about COVID-19 treatments. Before then, they weren't really a common household name. So because most biologics are made from living sources, it is normal for both biosimilars and the referent product to have minor differences between batches of the same medication. And so one way to think about this is like a recipe for making bread or even beer or wine. So all biologic medications, including biosimilars, are similar to loaves of bread if they were made with the same recipe that includes yeast, which is a living source. And so no one loaf is an exact copy of another, but they're so similar, you might not be able to tell much of a difference, but they're all the same type of bread. And this is true for biologics. Each batch of a biologic medication is made with a mix of ingredients that includes these living sources. And because living sources naturally have slight variations, each batch is not an exact copy, but each batch provides the same treatment benefits. And so this slide shows the key definitions and the law that governs biosimilars. So these are the statutory definitions of these products. So you've heard me maybe talk a little about reference product and biosimilar, but not interchangeable biosimilar yet. So a reference product is the product already approved by FDA, which the proposed biosimilar is compared to. And sometimes they call the reference product an original product or originator product. And the biosimilar is also a biological product, but it's highly similar to and has no clinically meaningful differences from that reference product. And an interchangeable biosimilar is a biosimilar that meets some additional criteria related to pharmacy substitution, and I'll go into that in another slide. So as discussed in the last slide, a biosimilar medication is an FDA-approved biologic medication that's biosimilar, that's very similar but not identical to a reference or original biologic medication. And they have no clinically meaningful differences from the original biologic. And what that means is that you can expect the same safety and effectiveness from the biosimilar over the course of treatment as you would the reference product. And biosimilars are made from the same types of sources, like we talked about, the living cells or microorganisms, and they're just as safe and effective as the original product. So they provide the same treatment benefits, they're given at the same strength and dose, and they're not expected to cause new or worsening side effects. So most biologics are made for living sources, like we talked about. They're not identical. And sometimes that can make people concerned because they're used to thinking that medications are identical. But this is nothing to worry about. It's totally normal for all biological products because they're made from these living sources. It's normal for them to have minor differences between batches. And that's why they're called biosimilar and why they aren't identical. The reference product has these same normal and expected variations. and the biosimilar matches these variations. But as part of the review process, FDA carefully reviews the differences between the original biologic and the biosimilar to ensure that they're safe and effective. And so this shows the high-level overview of the general requirements and data that FDA reviews to determine a medication is biosimilar to the reference product or original medication, such as comparisons of the molecular structure, the bioactivity, which is making sure the medication works like it's supposed to, checking that there are no impurities in the medication, and then other data that's clinical, like pharmacokinetics, which show how a medication is absorbed, distributed, and metabolized by the body to make sure it happens the same way as the reference product does. And so to summarize this sort of aspect of things, FDA reviews a lot of information to decide whether a biosimilar meets FDA's approval standards and ensures that there are safe, effective treatment options. This includes ensuring that manufacturers show there are no differences in side effects, including that the side effects of the biosimilar are not more frequent or more severe than those of the original biologic. In addition, biosimilars undergo the same robust quality assessment as their original biologic. So how are biosimilars like generics? So generic is a well-known framework for prescription medications and over-the-counter medications. And biosimilars are like generics in some ways in that both types of medications are compared to an original brand product for approval. So they're both versions of previously FDA-approved medications, and they may offer more affordable treatment options to patients. And the reason why one is biosimilar and one is generic is because they are approved through different regulatory approval pathways, but they both avoid duplicating the costly clinical trials. And so both of these products go through a rigorous review process, but there are differences between biosimilars and generics. Biosimilars and the original biologic are generally made from those natural and living sources, like we talked about, and generics and the brand are made from chemical ingredients, and chemical ingredients can be more easily copied, whereas natural and living sources cannot be exactly copied. There are some cases where there's some like less complicated biologics that can be exactly copied, but in general, most of them are pretty complicated. And so the information needed to demonstrate that a biologic is biosimilar to another biologic is much more extensive than what's needed for a generic to prove they are a copy of the brand. So I want to go back and go over some information about interchangeable biosimilars that we touched on earlier. There's a lot of confusion about these products, and a lot of thoughts that an interchangeable might be better than a biosimilar. But an interchangeable is a biosimilar, and it may be substituted without consulting the prescriber because it meets additional requirements related to the potential for automatic substitution. And so with an interchangeable biosimilar, it would be similar to how you get a generic from the pharmacy, that you get your prescription from the doctor, you go to the pharmacy to fill it, and the pharmacist could give you the brand or original biologic, or they could give you the interchangeable biosimilar. This is, like I said, similar to how generics are substituted, but not all biosimilars are interchangeable. Companies must request approval as an interchangeable biosimilar specifically. So what is the difference between a biosimilar and interchangeable biosimilar besides that pharmacy substitution piece? Scientifically and clinically, nothing is different. They both meet FDA's requirements for showing that they are highly similar to and have no clinically meaningful differences from a biologic already approved by FDA. The law that governs biosimilars states that if it is automatically substituted at the pharmacy, it has to be determined to be an interchangeable. And so therefore, that's why a company has to specifically apply for it and then show information that means it can be substituted at the pharmacy. But there are many reasons why companies do not apply as interchangeable, such as business reasons, or because the medication is administered at a hospital or outpatient clinic and you would not be able to get it at your local pharmacy. One thing I do want to touch on is that patients and healthcare providers can be confident in the safety and effectiveness of both biosimilar and interchangeable products and prescribe them like just as you would for the reference product, or take them just as you would for the reference product. that biosimilar, interchangeable biosimilars can be used in patients regardless of whether they have used the reference product or not. So that would be treatment experienced if you've used the reference product, and in patients who have not been previously treated with the reference product, which is sometimes called treatment naive. And then again, the only difference between interchangeable biosimilars and biosimilars is that interchangeable ones may be substituted for the reference product without notifying the prescribing healthcare provider, depending on the state law, but they can all be prescribed and used for any of the approved indications. Why would a patient switch to a biosimilar? So if you're currently using a biologic and you're concerned about cost, you and your healthcare provider may want to talk about switching to a biosimilar if one is available. You may also be switched to a biosimilar due to your health insurance coverage. And like we just talked about, you might be given one at the pharmacy if they're interchangeable because they can be substituted there. Biosimilars that are not interchangeable generally have to be prescribed specifically by your doctor. And will they save you money? So that's the big question. And we know very well that biologics are very expensive and can be unaffordable, especially for patients using several medications. The goal of the biosimilars approval pathway is to offer more access to treatments at a lower cost. And so biosimilars are approved by relying on FDA's finding that the original biologic is safe and effective, and that, as discussed, you don't have to duplicate these certain costly clinical trials. And so theoretically, biosimilars cost less to make. And so the hope is that the lower cost will save patients money and that the biosimilars will be covered by more insurance companies. However, all of that is very complicated, and FDA itself does not have, input into the cost of drugs or the coverage, and reimbursement can depend on many factors such as insurance plans and the formulary coverage. And so we advise people to, check your insurance provider, and also if you're covered by Medicare or Medicaid, to check with CMS and your plan provider. So the next few slides, I'm going to review the resources that FDA has available about biologics, and so that you can get more information. And just also so you know that developing education materials is a very important part of the work that we do at FDA to help increase understanding of these products. So the first one I'm going to talk about is the Purple Book database. And this is a database for the public, and it has an online search engine with information about all FDA licensed biological products, including reference, biosimilar, and interchangeable products. It also contains information about all FDA licensed allergenic, cellular, and gene therapy products and vaccines. So this database is pretty extensive and has many features to meet the needs of a variety of users. And so there are simple and advanced search options. There's a glossary, there's links to product labels, and there's the ability to search, filter, and sort information depending on your needs. So healthcare providers can use this to find information about what products can be substituted. They can, patients can find information about what biosimilars are approved to a reference product, along with much more. And so there's a user guide that provides the, descriptions and specific instructions on how to utilize the Purple Book. So on this slide is a snapshot of some of the materials we have available for healthcare providers, including fact sheets, and on the left is a list of the free continuing medical education courses that we've worked on with Medscape that are available. We also have videos and infographics. And one of the most comprehensive resources that we have is our curriculum toolkit. And so this was designed to help educate students in healthcare professional degree programs like medical school, nursing, pharmacy, physician associates. And the toolkit provides teaching faculty and other interested stakeholders, so you don't have to be in one of those schools in order to go here, with resources to understand, apply, and teach concepts related to biosimilar and interchangeable biosimilars, along with information about the corresponding regulatory approval pathway. And so it's designed to meet a variety of teaching needs. It's modular, and it contains foundational as well as more in-depth information by levels. And there are slide decks, discussion questions, case studies, information sheets, and more that can all be used to either convey the concepts or learn more. We also do a lot of stakeholder engagement. This is another very important part of the work that we do, similar to how I'm providing this outreach webinar here to help people understand more about biosimilars. And so we've created some materials with some of our federal stakeholders and other stakeholders like the United States Pharmacopoeia or USP and the Federal Trade Commission. And so we have some materials in our site that reflect this collaboration that are also very helpful to understand about biosimilars. So this one shows a snapshot of our patient materials available, including fact sheets, infographics, and articles. We also have a patient-focused video. And on the next slide, it shows the availability that we have in all the different languages. So many of our patient and healthcare provider materials are translated into a variety of languages, including Spanish, Chinese, Tagalog, Vietnamese, French, Arabic, and the other ones that you see here on the screen. So as with all treatment decisions, you should talk to your healthcare provider and check other trusted sources of information related to your specific condition to learn more about biosimilar treatment options. So this slide is just a list of links to the resources that we've talked about and a couple that we didn't, our guidance webpage and Drugs at FDA if you want to take a deeper dive into information about biosimilars. So thank you very much for your time. You can visit fda.gov/biosimilars to learn more. And please feel free to share any of the materials that we have available with anyone who may be interested. You can take them and make them your own. And as stated earlier, stakeholder outreach is very important to us, and we're happy to connect if there's opportunities to provide education. So thank you very much.